The carriage shuddered violently, and Tamsin Ashworth grabbed the edge of the seat to keep from being thrown to the floor. Outside, the world had vanished. White upon white, a blizzard so dense it swallowed everything. Trees, road, sky, all of it gone. Across from her, Lord Aldrich Vance sat with infuriating stillness. One leg crossed over the other, gloved hands folded in his lap, watching the chaos through the frosted window as if it were a mildly interesting painting rather than a potentially deadly catastrophe. "We should have left yesterday," Tamsin said through gritted teeth, "when your sister suggested it." "My sister suggests many things." His voice was low, measured, and utterly indifferent. "Not all of them sensible. And delaying our departure until the weather turned murderous, that was sensible." Now he looked at her, gray eyes, the color of winter storms, flat and unimpressed. "The weather was clear this morning, Miss Ashworth. I cannot control atmospheric conditions." "No, but you could have listened to the coachman when he warned about the coming storm." "The coachman also warned me about a supposedly cursed bridge 3 miles back. Forgive me for not treating his predictions as gospel." The carriage lurched again. Tamsin's shoulder slammed against the wall, and she hissed in pain. "Perhaps," Aldrich said coolly. "You should brace yourself properly." She wanted to scream. 7 years. 7 years of enduring this man's presence whenever her brother Piers brought him home from university. 7 years of being looked through, spoken around, treated like an inconvenient piece of furniture that occasionally made noise. She remembered the first time they met. She'd been 19, flushed with excitement to meet her brother's brilliant new friend, the future Duke of Thornmere. She'd worn her best dress. She'd practiced clever things to say. And Aldrich Vance had looked at her exactly once, noted that her hem was muddy, and spent the rest of the evening discussing philosophy with Piers as if she didn't exist. The second time, 2 years later, he'd informed her that her opinion on crop rotation was charmingly uninformed. The third time, he'd left a room the moment she entered it. The fourth, fifth, sixth. She'd lost count of the small cruelties, the dismissive glances, the way he spoke to her brother about her, as if she weren't standing right there. "Your sister has quite the laugh," he'd once said to Piers. "One can hear it from 3 rooms away." She'd stopped laughing so loudly after that, had trained herself to be quieter, smaller, and less visible around him, and she hated herself for it. "How much farther to Ashworth House?" she asked, keeping her voice controlled. 12 miles, perhaps 13. "In this weather, the coachman believes we can push through." As if summoned by his words, the carriage slowed, then stopped. Voices shouted outside, the coachman and footman arguing over something. Aldrich opened the door, letting in a blast of ice-cold wind that cut through Tamsin's cloak like a blade. "What's happening?" "Road's blocked ahead, my lord." The coachman's voice was nearly lost in the howling storm. "Snowdrift's too high. Can't see a damn thing. If we push forward, we'll end up in a ditch or worse." "Is there shelter nearby?" "The Stag and Stone, maybe half a mile back. Small coaching inn. Saw smoke from the chimneys as we passed." Aldrich's jaw worked, muscles tensing visibly. Tamsin could see the calculation behind his eyes, the weighing of options, none of them good. "Turn around," he said finally. "We'll wait out the storm there." The door slammed shut. The carriage began the slow, treacherous process of turning on the narrow road. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the screaming wind. "One night," Tamsin said. "Perhaps 2. Then we continue. If the storm breaks." He wasn't looking at her. "These blizzards can last days. Days. I've seen them trap travelers for a week. A week. A week trapped at an inn with a man who could barely tolerate her presence for an evening." "Wonderful," she muttered. "The feeling is mutual, Miss Ashworth." She turned to the window, blinking hard against the sting in her eyes. She would not cry. Not in front of him. Not over something as stupid as his casual cruelty. But somewhere deep in her chest, something ached. Because she remembered when she'd wanted him to like her. When she'd watched him across dinner tables, admiring his sharp intellect, his rare half-smiles, the way he listened when peers spoke about important things. She'd been such a fool. The stag and stone emerged from the blizzard like a ghost. Dark stone walls, snow-covered roof, windows glowing amber with firelight. It was small, old, and utterly overwhelmed. Even from outside, Tamsin could see the chaos through the windows. Travelers packed the common room, all of them clearly stranded by the same storm. Horses crowded the stable yard. A harried stable boy ran past, shouting something about no more space. Aldrich descended from the carriage first, then turned to help her down. His hand was steady, impersonal, and she hated that she needed it. The ground was treacherous, ice beneath fresh snow, and her boots weren't made for this weather. His fingers gripped hers just a moment longer than necessary. Then he released her and stepped away, already moving toward the inn's entrance. Inside was worse than she'd feared. The air was thick with wet wool, wood smoke, and the smell of stew. Every seat was taken. Travelers stood shoulder to shoulder, complaining about the storm, demanding rooms, arguing over space near the fire. The innkeeper, a red-faced man with sweat on his brow, stood behind a battered counter, shaking his head at someone. "No more rooms," he was saying. "Full up. You can try the stable, but the horses have taken most of the space." Aldrich moved to the counter with the easy authority of a man who'd never been told no. "I need accommodations for myself and my companion." "Didn't you hear me?" The innkeeper barely glanced at him. "Full up. Storm's caught everyone." "Surely there's something. A private parlor, servants' quarters, anything." The innkeeper laughed bitterly. "I've got 3 families sharing the private parlor. My own wife's given up our bedroom to a countess and her maid. There's nothing." Tamsin's stomach dropped. Nowhere to stay. They couldn't sleep in the common room, not without destroying her reputation entirely. The carriage would freeze them to death within hours. "Check again," Aldrich said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "I'll pay triple the usual rate." The innkeeper paused. Greed flickered in his eyes. "Well," he said slowly, "there might be one room, attic space, small, single bed, usually used for storage. We'll take it." "We?" The word escaped Tamsin before she could stop it. Aldrich's hand clamped around her elbow, pulling her close enough that only she could hear. "Unless you'd prefer to sleep in the stable with the horses, Miss Ashworth, I suggest you remain silent." "One room?" she hissed. "One bed? Have you lost your mind?" "I've lost my patience." His grip tightened. "The alternative is scandal of a different kind. The kind where everyone in this inn sees us unable to secure proper lodging. At least a private room provides the illusion of propriety." "The illusion? We'd be sharing. We'd be surviving." His eyes were hard. "One night. Perhaps 2. We'll manage." The innkeeper was watching them with increasing interest. His gaze moved between them, calculating. Aldrich seemed to notice at the same moment she did. His expression shifted, became something smoother, more deliberate. "Forgive my wife," he said, and Tamsin nearly choked. "She's anxious about the storm. We're recently married, and this wasn't the journey we'd planned." "Wife." He'd called her his wife. The innkeeper's face cleared immediately. "Ah, newlyweds. Why didn't you say so? The attic room's small but private. Cozy for a young couple, if you take my meaning." He winked. Tamsin wanted to die. "I'll have a fire lit and supper sent up," the innkeeper continued, warming to them now. 20 shillings for the night, and I'll throw in breakfast if the storm breaks." Aldrich paid without hesitation. Coins exchanged hands. A key appeared. "Up the stairs, 3rd floor, door at the end of the hall. Mind the ceiling, it's low." "Thank you." Aldrich's hand found the small of Tamsin's back, guiding her toward the stairs, with the easy intimacy of a man touching his wife. She waited until they were out of earshot, climbing the narrow staircase before she exploded. "Your wife. Would you have preferred I told them the truth?" His voice was low, dangerous. "That I'm traveling alone with my best friend's unmarried sister? That would protect your reputation beautifully. And what happens when someone recognizes you? When someone realizes you're the Duke of Thornmere's heir, engaged to Lady Cosima Blackwell?" Something shifted in his gaze, too fast to read. "No one will recognize me. These are common travelers, merchants and farmers, not members of the ton. And Lady Cosima," he paused. "Lady Cosima is none of your concern. She'll be very concerned when she learns her betrothed spent a blizzard pretending to be married to another woman." "She won't learn," his expression hardened, "because this never happened. As far as anyone outside this inn knows, we arrived separately, secured separate accommodations, and continued on our way once the storm passed. And Piers? What do we tell my brother?" "The same. He'll believe what we tell him." They'd reached the 3rd floor. A narrow hallway stretched ahead, lit by a single sputtering candle. The ceiling was low. Aldrich had to duck, and the door at the end looked like it belonged to a closet. "One night," he said, unlocking it. "2 at most. We maintain the fiction, weather the storm, and never speak of this again." He pushed the door open. The room was tiny, barely larger than a carriage compartment. A single bed dominated the space, narrow, sagging, clearly designed for one small person. There was a washstand, crammed into one corner, a wooden chair that looked ready to collapse, and a fireplace so small it might have been decorative. And one bed. One narrow, inadequate bed. "You're sleeping on the floor," Tamsin said immediately. "The floor is bare wood over an ice-cold attic. I'll freeze." "Then you'll freeze. Better than sharing that." She pointed at the bed. Aldrich closed the door behind them with a quiet click. The sound felt final. Trapping. "We're both adults, Miss Ashworth. We can share a bed without incident." "We most certainly cannot." "Then I'll take the chair. The chair will collapse the moment you sit on it. Then I'll stand. All night. If necessary." They stared at each other, the space between them charged with something hot and furious. "I despise you," Tamsin said quietly. "The feeling remains mutual." Silence. The wind screamed outside, rattling the single small window like something trying to get in. Finally, Aldrich moved to the fireplace, kneeling to coax life from the pathetic pile of kindling the innkeeper's boy had left. After a moment, weak flames flickered to life, casting dancing shadows across his profile. He looked tired, she realized. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 7 years ago. His shoulders held tension like a drawn bow. "Why do you hate me so much?" The question escaped before she could stop herself. His hand stilled on the fire poker. "I don't hate you. You've treated me like an inconvenience since the day we met." "You are an inconvenience." The words landed like a slap. She turned away, throat constricting. "I didn't mean it like that." His voice was quieter now, almost gentle. "I meant this situation. Being trapped here. It's inconvenient for both of us." "That's not what you said." "No, it isn't." She heard him rise, heard his footsteps cross the small room, felt him stop just behind her. "Get some sleep, Miss Ashworth. I'll take the chair, or what remains of it. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." She didn't turn around. Couldn't turn around, because if she did, he might see the tears she was barely holding back. "Fine," she managed. "Fine." The chair creaked alarmingly as he settled into it. She climbed onto the bed, still fully dressed, pulling the thin blanket around herself. The fire crackled weakly. The wind howled. And somewhere in the darkness, Aldrich Vance sat watching over her like a guard, or perhaps a prisoner. Neither of them slept. Morning came gray and brutal. The storm hadn't broken. If anything, it had worsened. Through the frost-covered window, Tamsin could see nothing but white, a wall of snow and wind that obliterated the world. Aldrich was already awake when she opened her eyes. He stood by the window in his shirt sleeves, coat discarded over the half-collapsed chair, watching the blizzard with an expression she couldn't read. "How long?" she asked, voice rough with exhaustion. "The innkeeper says another 2 days at minimum, perhaps 3. 3 days. 3 days trapped in this room with a man who radiated hostility like heat from a furnace." She sat up, painfully aware of her wrinkled dress, her disheveled hair, the complete lack of privacy for even basic necessities. "I need to wash," she said. "And change. My trunk is still in the carriage. I had the footman retrieve it this morning while you slept." He nodded toward the corner, where her small traveling trunk now sat. "There's water in the pitcher. It's cold, but it's clean. And you? Will you give me privacy?" Something moved behind his gaze. Irritation, perhaps, or something else. "I'll step into the hall. Knock when you're decent." He was gone before she could respond, the door closing firmly behind him. Tamsin washed quickly, shivering in the frigid air. She changed into a fresh dress, simpler than yesterday's, but at least unwrinkled, and pinned up her hair as best she could without a mirror. By the time she opened the door to admit him, she felt marginally more human. Aldrich entered without a word, moving to the washstand to splash water on his own face. He'd retrieved his own bag at some point. She saw a clean shirt draped over the trunk, a razor kit beside the pitcher. "We should establish some rules," he said, back to her as he dried his face. "If we're to share this space without killing each other." Rules, boundaries, schedules, an understanding of how we'll manage. "Fine." She crossed her arms. "Rule 1. You don't speak to me unless absolutely necessary." "Accepted." He turned to face her, expression cool. "Rule 2. We maintain the fiction of marriage when others are present. No arguing, no contradicting, no suspicious behavior." "And when we're alone?" "When we're alone, we can despise each other as much as we like." It should have been reassuring. Instead, it stung. "Rule 3, she continued. "The bed is mine. You find somewhere else to sleep. The floor will give me frostbite, and the chair has already lost a leg. I woke up on the ground at 4 in the morning. Not my problem. It will be your problem when I'm too frozen to function, and you're left explaining to your brother why his best friend died of hypothermia while you slept comfortably." She hated that he had a point. "Fine," she gritted out. "We'll take turns. One night the bed, one night the floor. I'll go first." "How generous of you. Would you prefer I let you freeze?" "I'd prefer many things that aren't possible at the moment." They glared at each other across the tiny room. The tension between them felt almost solid, a wall of ice and fire that neither could breach. "Breakfast," he said finally. "The innkeeper's wife is serving in the common room. We should eat while we can." "Together? We're married, remember? It would look strange for a wife to eat alone." She wanted to refuse, wanted to stay in this room and starve rather than play-act affection with a man who could barely stand her. But her stomach growled, loud enough that his eyebrow rose slightly. "Fine," she said again. It seemed to be the only word she could manage around him. The common room was chaos. Travelers everywhere, children crying, servants running back and forth with trays and tankards. The only available seats were at a long communal table, already crowded with strangers. Aldrich guided her through the crowd, his hand resting lightly on her lower back in a gesture that should have felt possessive, but instead felt protective. She hated that she noticed the difference. They found 2 seats together, squeezed between a large merchant discussing wool prices and an elderly woman knitting something gray and shapeless. The innkeeper's wife, a harried woman with kind eyes, brought them porridge and weak tea. Terrible storm, the merchant said cheerfully, apparently addressing anyone who'd listen. Haven't seen one like it in 20 years. My father always said blizzards this bad only come when someone's angered the old gods. I doubt the gods are responsible for weather patterns, Aldrich said coolly. You'd be surprised, sir. My grandmother once told me about a blizzard that buried an entire village because the Lord there refused to shelter a beggar woman. Froze solid. Every one of them. Charming story. True story. Point is, you never know what forces are at work. Could be fate, destiny, and some higher power pushing us all exactly where we need to be. Tamsin stirred her porridge, not meeting anyone's eyes. Where we need to be, as if fate had intended for her to be trapped in an attic room with the one man in England she couldn't stand. And you two? The merchant turned his attention to them. Traveling somewhere important when the storm caught you? Home, Aldrich said smoothly. My wife and I were visiting family. Her brother, in fact. Newlyweds? The merchant beamed. I can always tell. You have that look about you. What look is that? The one where you can't quite decide if you want to kiss each other or strangle each other. He laughed. All newlyweds have it. The passion's still fresh, you see. Hasn't settled into comfortable boredom yet. Tamsin's cheeks burned. She focused very hard on her porridge. How long have you been married? The elderly woman asked, looking up from her knitting with sharp, curious eyes. 3 weeks, Tamsin said. At the exact moment Aldrich said. 2 months. Silence. The merchant's eyebrows rose. The elderly woman's needles stilled. What my wife means, Aldrich said without missing a beat, is that it feels like 3 weeks. Time moves strangely when you're happy. Does it? Tamsin smiled sweetly. I find it moves rather slowly, actually. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Darling, you wound me. Impossible. You'd have to have feelings first. The merchant laughed uncertainly. Ah, the bickering. That's part of it too. My wife and I bickered for 30 years. God rest her soul. My condolences, Tamsin murmured. Don't be. She'd have wanted me to remember her fondly, not sadly. He raised his tankard. To the storms that bring us together, and the patience required to survive them. They ate in tense silence after that. The merchant eventually wandered off to discuss wool with someone else. The elderly woman returned to her knitting, though her eyes kept darting toward them with knowing amusement. When they finally escaped back to their room, Tamsin rounded on him. 3 weeks? 2 months? We couldn't even keep our story straight for 5 minutes. You should have let me do the talking. You should have told me what our story was. I assumed you could follow basic conversational cues. And I assumed you could count. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she'd never seen from him before. It made him look younger, almost human. This is impossible, he muttered. 2 days, perhaps 3. How are we supposed to maintain this fiction when we can't stand to be in the same room? Maybe you should have thought of that before announcing we were married. Maybe you should have secured your own lodging. There was no other lodging. Then stop complaining about the solution I found. They were both breathing hard, standing too close in the tiny room, voices raised loud enough that anyone in the hall could probably hear. Tamsin stepped back first. This is madness. Agreed. We need to stay away from other travelers, limit our interactions, less chance for contradictions. Also agreed. And when we are forced to interact, you do the talking. I'll smile and nod like a dutiful wife. His jaw tightened. You've never been dutiful in your life. And you've never been pleasant. Yet, here we are, pretending. Silence fell between them. Not comfortable, but exhausted. The fight draining out of them both. I'll have supper sent up tonight, Aldrich said quietly. We'll stay in the room as much as possible. Minimize contact with others. Fine. Stop saying fine. What would you prefer I say? He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable moving behind his eyes. Nothing, he said finally. Say nothing at all. It's easier that way. He moved to the window, staring out at the endless white, and she was left standing in the middle of the room, arms wrapped around herself, wondering why his dismissal still hurt after all these years, because it shouldn't. She should be used to it by now, should have armored herself against his coldness, but somewhere deep inside, in a place she'd tried desperately to bury, a small voice whispered, "What if he looked at me, just once, like I mattered?" She silenced it. That voice had caused her nothing but pain for 7 years. She wouldn't listen to it now. By afternoon, the walls of their tiny room felt like they were closing in. Tamsin had read the same page of her borrowed book 17 times without absorbing a single word. Aldrich had taken to pacing, 3 steps to the window, 3 steps to the door, turn, repeat, until she wanted to throw something at him. "Stop that," she finally snapped. "Stop what?" "The pacing. You're making me dizzy. I'm thinking." "Think sitting down." He shot her a look of pure irritation, but lowered himself onto the repaired chair. Someone had fixed the broken leg with rope and what appeared to be a piece of firewood. It creaked ominously but held. "We need fresh air," Tamsin said. "I'm going to the common room." "I'll come with you." "I don't need a chaperone." "You need a husband." His voice was dry. "Remember?" She hated that he was right. Again. The common room was less crowded than this morning. Some travelers had retreated to their rooms. Others had ventured to the stables to check on horses and carriages. A fire roared in the massive stone fireplace, and the smell of roasting meat drifted from the kitchen. Tamsin found a seat near the fire, grateful for the warmth. Aldrich settled beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Playing the part. "Mrs. Sterling?" The innkeeper's wife appeared with 2 cups of mulled wine. "Thought you and your husband might want something to warm you. On the house. For newlyweds." Sterling. Aldrich had given a false name when he'd registered them. Smart, she supposed. Less chance of recognition. "Thank you," Tamsin said, accepting the cup. The wine was cheap but warm, and she drank gratefully. "Dreadful storm," the innkeeper's wife continued, hovering. "Haven't seen one this bad since the winter my mother died. Trapped us for a full week, that one did. By the end, we were burning furniture just to stay warm." "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," Aldrich said. "Oh, you'll be fine. Young love keeps you warm, doesn't it?" She winked and bustled away. Young love. If only she knew. "Miss Ashworth." Tamsin's head snapped up. A man stood before her, tall, fair-haired, with the kind of handsome face that belonged in a portrait. He was smiling at her with familiar warmth. Recognition hit her like a blow. "Mr. Thorne?" She rose automatically, years of social training taking over. "Corvin Thorne? What are you doing here?" "Same as everyone, I imagine." Caught by the storm, his smile widened. "Though I must say, finding you here makes the inconvenience worthwhile. It's been, 3 years since the Pemberton ball?" "Nearly that." She felt herself smiling back, genuinely this time. Corvin Thorne had been one of the few bright spots of that particular season. A distant neighbor, charming and attentive, who danced with her twice and made her laugh. Nothing had come of it, of course. He'd been courting someone else, and she'd been too shy to encourage him. But she remembered the attention, the way he'd looked at her like she was worth looking at. "You look well," Corvin said, eyes moving over her with obvious appreciation. "Better than well, actually. Radiant. I look like I've been trapped in a carriage during a blizzard." But she felt herself blushing. "Radiant," he repeated firmly. "I always thought you were the loveliest woman in any room. I see nothing's changed." Beside her, Aldrich had gone very still. "Mr. Sterling." Corvin's gaze moved to him, assessing. "I don't believe we've met." "We haven't." Aldrich's voice was cool, flat. "I'm Miss Ashworth's husband." The word hit the air like a stone into water. Corvin's expression flickered. Surprise? Then something else. Calculation, perhaps. Or disappointment. Husband? He looked between them. I hadn't heard you were engaged, let alone married. It was recent, Tamsin said quickly. Very recent. We haven't made any announcements yet. How sudden. Corvin's smile returned, but it was different now, sharper. And Sterling. Forgive me, but I don't recognize the name. What family are you from? A merchant family. Aldrich's hand came to rest on Tamsin's lower back, fingers splaying with deliberate possessiveness. Textiles and shipping. A merchant. Corvin's eyebrows rose. How unconventional. I didn't realize the Ashworths were so progressive. My husband's success is entirely self-made, Tamsin said, the lie coming easier now. I find that more impressive than inherited titles. Do you? Corvin's gaze lingered on her face. You've changed then. I remember you being quite taken with the aristocratic life. All those seasons in London. All those balls and parties. People evolve, Mr. Thorne. Indeed they do. Aldrich's hand pressed more firmly against her back. A warning or a claim. She couldn't tell which. We were just about to return to our room, Aldrich said. My wife tires easily. I'm not tired? You look tired, darling. His voice was sweet, but his eyes were hard. We should rest before supper. Surely you can spare your wife for a few minutes of conversation with an old friend? Corvin gestured to a nearby table. I'd love to catch up, hear about this whirlwind romance of yours. I'm afraid a few minutes won't hurt. Tamsin stepped away from Aldrich's hand, something defiant rising in her chest. He didn't own her. This was a pretense, nothing more. And Corvin Thorne was looking at her the way she'd always wanted someone to look at her, like she was worth the attention. She sat at the table. Corvin sat across from her, smile triumphant. Aldrich remained standing for a long moment, his face taut with frustration. Then he lowered himself into the chair beside her, close enough that his leg pressed against hers beneath the table. So, Corvin said, leaning forward with interest, tell me everything. How did a merchant capture the heart of Miss Tamsin Ashworth? It was quite romantic, actually. Tamsin's mind raced, constructing a story. We met through my brother. Piers has been involved in some shipping investments, and Mr. Sterling was handling the accounts. Love over ledgers? Corvin laughed. How practical. There's nothing wrong with practicality, Aldrich said quietly. Of course not. Though I always imagined Miss Ashworth with someone more. He trailed off, the implication clear. More what? Tamsin's voice sharpened. More suited to her station. No offense intended, Mr. Sterling, but surely you can see the mismatch. Miss Ashworth was raised for a certain kind of life. Balls, country houses, social seasons. Can a merchant's wife truly be happy in that world? I can be happy wherever I choose to be, Tamsin said coldly. Can you? Corvin's eyes were gentle, concerned. Because from what I've seen, you don't seem particularly happy now. You seem tense, uncomfortable, as if you're playing a role rather than living a life. Aldrich's hand found hers beneath the table. His grip was firm, almost painful. My wife's happiness is my concern, he said quietly. Not yours. I meant no disrespect. Corvin held up his hands. I simply care about Miss Ashworth's well-being. We've known each other for years. I'd hate to see her trapped in an unsuitable situation. I'm not trapped. But even as Tamsin said it, she felt the irony. She was trapped. Just not in the way Corvin imagined. Of course not. His smile softened. Forgive me. I'm being presumptuous. It's just... He lowered his voice. I always regretted not pursuing you more seriously, Miss Ashworth. When I heard you were still unmarried after all these seasons, I thought perhaps... Well, it doesn't matter now. Her pulse jumped. You thought what? I thought perhaps I might have another chance. Foolish of me, clearly. Beside her, Aldrich had gone rigid. She could feel the tension radiating off him like heat. "We should go," he said abruptly, standing. "My wife needs rest." "I'm fine. Now." His hand closed around her elbow, pulling her up. "Forgive us, Mr. Thorne. Perhaps we'll continue this conversation at supper." "I look forward to it." Corvin's smile was knowing, amused. "It was wonderful seeing you again, Miss Ashworth. Or should I say, Mrs. Sterling?" Aldrich steered her away before she could respond, his grip firm as he guided her through the common room, up the stairs, down the narrow hallway to their door. The moment it closed behind them, she yanked her arm free. What was that? What was what? That display, dragging me away like I was misbehaving. "You were being reckless." His voice was cold. Sitting with him, encouraging his attention, contradicting our story. I wasn't contradicting anything. "You were enjoying it." Something dark moved behind his eyes. His flattery, his attention. "You were practically glowing." "So what if I was?" She stepped closer, furious. "He was kind to me. He complimented me. He looked at me like I was worth looking at. Forgive me if I found that refreshing after 7 years of your dismissal." A muscle jumped in his jaw. "Thorne isn't interested in you. He's interested in what you represent." "And what's that?" "A conquest. A game. He sees a married woman who might be susceptible to his charms, and he's testing the waters." "That's ridiculous. He knew me before?" "He ignored you before." Aldrich's voice was harsh. 3 seasons, you said. He danced with you twice at one ball, and then forgot you existed. Now suddenly you're married and unavailable, and he's falling over himself with regret? The words stung because they were true. Corvin had shown no interest in her for 3 years. Why now? "Maybe he genuinely regrets missing his chance," she said, but her voice faltered. "Or maybe he sees what everyone like him sees, a woman of good family, recently married to a man of lower status, potentially unhappy with her choice. A target. I'm not a target. You're acting like one. And you're acting like a jealous husband." The words hung between them, sharp and dangerous. "I'm acting like someone responsible for your safety," he said quietly. "Thorne is not what he seems. Men like him never are." "Men like him," she repeated. "You mean men who actually notice me? Men who treat me like I exist?" Something cracked in his expression. "Is that what you think? That I don't notice you? I think you've spent 7 years making it abundantly clear that I'm an irritation you'd rather avoid." "That's not." He stopped, his gaze unreadable. "You don't understand. Then explain it to me." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned away, moving to the window, presenting her with his rigid back. "Stay away from Thorne," he said finally. "That's all I ask. You don't have the right to ask me anything. I have the right to protect you. I don't need your protection. Everyone needs protection from men like him." She wanted to scream, wanted to throw something. Instead, she sank onto the bed, suddenly exhausted. "I don't understand you," she said quietly. "You dismiss me for years, treat me like furniture, and make it clear I'm nothing but an inconvenience. And then, the moment another man shows interest, you act like what? Like you care." The silence stretched. The fire crackled weakly. Outside, the wind continued its relentless assault. "Get some rest," Aldrich said finally, not turning around. "I'll have supper sent up. We won't go to the common room tonight." "Aldrich, please." His voice was rough. "Just rest." She didn't argue. Couldn't argue. The fight had drained out of her, leaving nothing but confusion and an ache she couldn't name. She lay back on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, and wondered why his concern felt more like a wound than a comfort. Supper arrived on a wooden tray, cold meat, bread, cheese, and ale that tasted like it had been watered down. They ate in silence, seated on opposite sides of the tiny room, avoiding each other's eyes. When they finished, Aldrich took the tray outside the door for collection. He was gone longer than necessary, speaking with someone in the hall, perhaps, or simply avoiding her. Tamsin used the time to change into her nightgown, covered by her heaviest shawl. By the time he returned, she was seated by the weak fire, brushing out her hair. He stopped in the doorway, eyes moving over her, before he looked quickly away. "The storm should ease tomorrow afternoon," he said, closing the door. "According to the innkeeper." "Good. We can leave the following morning if the roads are clear." "Good." He moved to the window, his usual post. She continued brushing her hair, the rhythm soothing. Silence stretched between them, not comfortable, but not combative either. Something had shifted. The anger had burned out, leaving something rawer beneath. "About Thorne," she said finally. "I don't want to discuss him." "I'm not going to encourage him. You were right. His sudden interest is suspicious." Aldrich turned to look at her. "You believe me?" "I believe men don't change that dramatically without reason." She set down the brush. "And I know what I'm worth, or what I'm not worth. 3 years of being invisible to someone doesn't transform into passionate regret overnight." "You're wrong about that." "About what?" "About what you're worth." His voice was quiet, intense. "You were never invisible, Tamsin. Not to anyone with eyes." She stared at him, thrown. He'd used her first name. He never used her first name. "That's not what your behavior suggested," she said carefully. "My behavior was—" He stopped, teeth gritting. "Complicated. That's a convenient excuse." "It's the truth." He crossed the room, moving closer than he'd been since their fight. "Do you want to know why I avoided you? Why I treated you like you didn't exist?" Her heart stuttered. "Yes." He was close enough now that she could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes, the faint lines of exhaustion around his mouth. "Because noticing you was dangerous," he said quietly. "Because every time I looked at you, I saw something I couldn't have. And it was easier to pretend you weren't there than to acknowledge what I felt." The words landed like stones dropped into still water, sending ripples in every direction. "What you felt," she repeated slowly. "Feel." His correction was barely audible. "What I feel." She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. 7 years of dismissal, of coldness, of feeling like nothing, and now this? "You're engaged to Lady Cosima," she said. "Yes." "You're going to marry her." "That's the arrangement." "Then why are you telling me this?" He laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "Because apparently being trapped in a room with you has destroyed what remained of my self-control. Because I've spent 7 years pretending, and I'm tired. Because—" He stopped, running a hand over his face. "Because I'm a fool." A knock at the door made them both jump. "Mrs. Sterling?" A muffled voice called from the hallway. "There's a gentleman asking for you downstairs." "A Mr. Thorne?" Tamsin's stomach dropped. She glanced at Aldrich, whose expression had hardened into something cold and furious. "Tell him she's indisposed," Aldrich called back. "He says it's urgent, sir. Says he has information about her family. Her brother, specifically." Piers. Fear shot through her. "What kind of information?" "Didn't say, ma'am. Just that he needs to speak with you privately." Aldrich's hand caught her arm as she moved toward the door. "Don't." He mentioned Piers. "What if something's wrong?" "If something were wrong with your brother, you'd hear it from official channels, not from a traveling stranger who happened to encounter you at an inn." "But it's a manipulation, Tamsin. He's trying to get you alone." She hesitated. He was probably right. But what if he wasn't? What if something had happened to Piers and she ignored the warning? "I'll go with you," Aldrich said, reading her expression. "We'll hear what he has to say together." They descended to the common room, where Corvin waited near the fire, expression somber. A few other travelers lingered nearby, pretending not to watch. "Mrs. Sterling." Corvin rose as they approached. "Thank you for coming. I apologize for the intrusion." "You mentioned my brother," Tamsin said. "What about him? Perhaps we could speak somewhere more private?" "Anything you have to say can be said in front of my husband." Corvin's eyes narrowed, annoyance quickly masked. "Very well. I received correspondence this afternoon. A courier managed to get through before the worst of the storm. Among the letters was news from London. Your brother Piers has apparently been involved in a business dispute. Something about fraudulent investments." "That's absurd. Piers would never—" "I'm only reporting what I heard." Corvin's voice was gentle, concerned. "The accusation is serious. There's talk of criminal charges." "From whom? What source?" "A mutual acquaintance. Lord Henley. I believe you know him?" She did. Lord Henley was one of Piers's closest business associates. If he was making accusations— "I thought you should know," Corvin continued. "As a friend, if your brother is in trouble, perhaps there's something that can be done. Interventions, character witnesses, that sort of thing." "And you're offering to help?" Aldrich's voice was dangerously soft. "If I can. The Ashworths and the Thorns have always been on good terms. I'd hate to see the family suffer because of what might be a simple misunderstanding." "How convenient that you happened to receive this news just when you needed a reason to speak with my wife alone." Corvin's smile faltered. "I'm not sure what you're implying." "I'm implying that this feels less like genuine concern and more like a manufactured crisis." "Aldrich," Tamsin said quietly, "think about it." He turned to her, eyes intense. "He tried to get you alone earlier and failed. Now suddenly there's urgent news about your brother that only he possesses? News that conveniently requires private conversation to discuss?" "That's quite an accusation," Corvin said coldly. "I was trying to help." "Were you? Then you won't mind if we verify this information ourselves. Where's the letter? Show us the correspondence." Corvin's smile thinned. "It was a private communication. I've already destroyed it." "Of course you have." The tension in the room had shifted. Other travelers were watching openly now, sensing the conflict. "I see how it is," Corvin said quietly. "You've poisoned her against me, convinced her that any kindness must have ulterior motives. I've done nothing but point out inconsistencies in your story." "My story is true." Corvin turned to Tamsin, expression earnest. "I swear to you, I'm not lying about your brother. I wanted to warn you, that's all." "Then why did you want to speak privately?" Tamsin asked. "Why couldn't you say this in front of my husband?" "Because I don't trust him." The words came out sharp, honest. "I've been watching you two all day. Something isn't right. You don't look at each other like newlyweds. You look at each other like enemies." "Our relationship is none of your concern," Aldrich said. "It is when I suspect he's coercing you." Corvin stepped closer to Tamsin, lowering his voice. "Are you in trouble? Has he compromised you somehow? Forced you into this arrangement?" "I'm not, because if you are, I can help. My family has resources, connections. Whatever hold he has on you, we can break it." "She doesn't need rescuing," Aldrich said. "Especially not from me." "Then why does she look so miserable?" The question hung in the air. Tamsin felt the weight of it, the truth beneath the manipulation. Because she was miserable. Not because Aldrich had coerced her. The situation was accidental, not intentional. But because everything was wrong. The lies, the tension, and the impossible feelings she was developing for a man who was engaged to someone else. "I'm fine," she said quietly. "The storm has been stressful, that's all. If you're sure." Corvin's eyes searched her face. "But know that I'm here if you need me, whatever you need." "She needs you to leave her alone," Aldrich said. "That's her decision, not yours. Please." Tamsin held up a hand, suddenly exhausted. "Both of you. I'm not a prize to be fought over. I'm a person. And right now, this person wants to go back to her room and sleep. She turned and walked away before either of them could respond. She heard Aldrich's footsteps following, heard Corvin call something after them, but she didn't stop until she was back in their room with the door closed firmly behind them. "He's lying about your brother," Aldrich said. "You know that." "Probably." She sank onto the bed. "But what if he's not? What if something really has happened to Pierce? Then we'll find out when we leave. We'll send word, verify the information. But I promise you, Thorne manufactured that story to create exactly this kind of anxiety. Why? What does he gain? Your trust, your gratitude, a reason to keep inserting himself into your life." Aldrich moved closer, kneeling before her so they were eye to eye. "He sees something he wants, and he's willing to manipulate you to get it. And what does he want? You. Your family's money, your brother's connections, some combination of all three." She laughed bitterly. "Everyone wants something from me. My family, society, now apparently random strangers it ends. No one ever just—" She stopped, throat tight. "Just what? Wants me. Just me. Not what I represent or what I can offer or what alliance my marriage might create. Just me." His gaze changed. Something raw surfaced behind his eyes. "That's not true," he said quietly. "Isn't it?" "No." His hand came up, hovering near her face but not quite touching. "Someone wants just you. Has wanted you for longer than he should admit. Has spent years trying to convince himself otherwise and failing utterly." She couldn't breathe. "You don't have to say that." Her voice trembled. "You don't have to make me feel better. I'm not. I'm telling you the truth. Finally, after years of cowardice, I'm telling you the truth." His hand finally made contact, cupping her cheek with devastating gentleness. "You're not invisible, Tamsin. You never were. I saw you from the beginning. I've seen nothing but you ever since." Tears burned behind her eyes. "Then why?" "Because I'm promised to someone else. Because my father arranged the match with the Blackwells before I ever met you. Because by the time I understood what I felt, it was already too late." "It's not too late." The words escaped before she could stop them. "You could break the engagement? You could—" "I can't," his voice cracked. "My father's entire political strategy depends on this alliance, the Blackwell connections, their influence in Parliament, and the trade agreements they're negotiating. All of it hinges on my marriage to Cosima. If I break the engagement, I destroy everything he's built. So you'll marry someone you don't love. I'll do my duty, the way I've always done." She pulled back from his touch, suddenly cold. "Then why tell me any of this? Why torture us both with something that can never happen?" "Because you deserved to know." His eyes were agonized. "Because you've spent years thinking you weren't worth noticing, and I couldn't let you believe that lie anymore. Not after watching Thorne try to convince you otherwise for his own purposes. So this is— what? A kindness? A consolation prize? It's the truth. Take it however you will." She stared at him, heartbreaking. "You're cruel," she whispered. "To tell me this now. To make me feel something and then inform me it's impossible. I know. It would have been kinder to let me believe you hated me. Probably." He rose, stepping back. "But I've been lying to you for 7 years. I couldn't stomach one more night of it." He moved to the window, his back to her, and said nothing more. Tamsin lay down on the narrow bed, tears sliding silently into the pillow, and wondered if knowing the truth made everything better or infinitely worse. She didn't sleep. Neither did he. The fire burned low and went out. The cold crept in, seeping through the thin walls and inadequate window. Tamsin pulled the blanket tighter around herself, shivering, watching Aldrich's silhouette against the frosted glass. "You should take the bed," she said finally. "You'll freeze by that window." "I'm fine." "You're shivering. I can see it from here. Then don't look, she laughed, a broken, exhausted sound. This is absurd. We're both going to catch our deaths because we're too proud to share a bed like rational adults. There's nothing rational about this situation. Agreed. But hypothermia seems an excessive price to pay for propriety. He turned to look at her, his face shadowed. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that we're both fully clothed. There's one bed, and the room is freezing. We can share the bed without anything happening. Can we? The question hung between them, loaded with everything they'd just confessed. We have to, she said quietly, because the alternative is frostbite. And whatever else you are, Aldrich Vance, you're still my brother's best friend. I'd prefer not to explain to Piers why you lost fingers to cold while we were trapped together. A long pause. Then, slowly, he moved away from the window. She shifted to one side of the narrow bed, not that there was much side to shift to, and he lowered himself onto the other edge. They lay there rigidly, inches apart, staring at the ceiling. This is the most awkward moment of my life, Tamsin said. Mine as well. Good. At least we're suffering together. Silence. The wind howled. The cold pressed in from all sides. Tell me something, she said, because the silence was unbearable. Something I don't know about you. What do you want to know? Anything. Something real. Something you haven't told anyone else. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I hate being the heir. She turned her head to look at him. His profile was sharp against the darkness, jaw clenched. I've never said that out loud before, he continued quietly. Not even to Piers, especially not to my father. But I hate it. The expectations, the obligations, the way every decision I make affects hundreds of people. The way I'm not allowed to want things for myself. What do you want? It doesn't matter. Tell me anyway. Another long pause. His voice, when it came, was barely audible. I want to travel. See places no one in my family has ever seen. I want to wake up in the morning without a list of duties and obligations hanging over my head. I want to read books without someone asking if they're appropriate for a future duke. I want... He stopped. What? I want to love someone without calculating the political implications. Her heart clenched. Aldrich, I know it's impossible. I know I sound like a child complaining about a privileged life. But you asked what I wanted, and that's the truth. I want to be free. Just once. Just for a moment. You're free right now. He turned his head to look at her. In the darkness, his eyes were silver. Am I? No one knows who you are. No one here expects anything from you. For this one night, you're not the Duke of Thornmere's heir. You're just... you. A man trapped in a tiny room with a woman he can't have. A man who's finally being honest. That's a kind of freedom. He stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, his hand found hers beneath the blanket. His fingers were cold, trembling slightly. I shouldn't touch you, he said. No. I should keep my distance. Yes. Tell me to stop. I can't. His grip tightened, not pulling her closer, just holding on, as if she were an anchor in a storm. When we leave here, he said quietly, everything goes back to the way it was. I'll marry Cosima. You'll return to your life. We'll pretend this never happened. I know. I'll see you at your brother's house, at balls and dinners, and I'll have to act like you're nothing to me. I know. It's going to destroy me. Tears slipped down her cheeks. It's going to destroy me too. Then why does this feel like the most honest moment of my life? She didn't have an answer. There was no answer. Just two people holding hands in the dark, knowing it couldn't last, choosing to hold on anyway. Tell me about you, he said. Something I don't know. She thought about it. So many secrets she'd kept. So many truths she'd hidden. "I almost ran away once," she said. 3 years ago, after the Pemberton ball. I was going to take my savings and disappear. Find work somewhere as a governess or companion. Start a new life where no one knew me. What stopped you? Piers. He found me packing. He didn't ask questions, didn't lecture me. He just sat on my bed and said, "If you need to go, I'll help you. But I'll miss you every day." And I realized. She swallowed hard. I realized that running away wouldn't make me happy. It would just make me alone. You were that unhappy? I was that invisible. Season after season of being overlooked, passed over, treated like I was somehow insufficient. Do you know what that does to a person? How it makes you feel like you're slowly disappearing? His hand squeezed hers. "I'm sorry." For what? For being part of that. For making you feel unseen when the truth was the opposite. The truth being that you saw me too clearly. The truth being that I saw you and wanted you and couldn't have you. So I convinced myself it was easier to pretend you didn't exist. That's a terrible coping strategy. I'm aware. She laughed despite herself. It felt strange. Laughing in the dark with him, their hands intertwined, the world outside frozen and impossible. "What happens now?" she asked. "I don't know." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "We should sleep. Tomorrow will be difficult." Because of Corvin? Because of everything. Maintaining the fiction, avoiding his questions, getting through another day without... He stopped. Without what? Without doing something we'll both regret. She turned onto her side, facing him. In the darkness, she could barely make out his features, but she could feel the heat of him, the tension in his body. "Would you regret it?" she whispered. "Really?" "No." The word was immediate. "Certain. That's the problem. I wouldn't regret a single moment. And that would make the afterwards unbearable. The afterwards. When I have to let you go. When I have to watch you marry someone else. Build a life with someone else. While I'm trapped in a marriage I never wanted. Then don't." Her voice wavered. "Don't marry her. Fight for what you want." It's not that simple. It is. It's exactly that simple. You're just too afraid to do it. He went still beside her. "You think I'm a coward. I think you've been trained to put duty before everything, including your own happiness. And I think that training is going to ruin your life. Duty isn't a weakness. It is when it becomes a prison." Silence stretched between them, thick with everything they weren't saying. "I can't fight my father," he said finally. "Not about this. The Blackwell Alliance is too important. People are depending on it. Tenants, servants, entire communities that rely on the agreements being negotiated. If I walk away from Cosima, I'm not just disappointing my father. I'm failing hundreds of people who trust my family to protect them. So you'll sacrifice yourself. If I have to. And what about me?" The words escaped before she could stop them. "What about what I want? What do you want? You." It was barely a whisper. "I want you. I've wanted you for years, even when I thought I hated you. Especially when I thought I hated you." His breath caught. In the darkness, she felt him shift closer, felt the warmth of his body against hers. "Tamsin, don't say it's impossible. Don't remind me of all the reasons we can't. Just..." She reached up, touching his face. "Just be here. With me. For tonight." His hand covered hers, pressing her palm to his cheek. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." They lay there in the darkness, foreheads nearly touching, breathing the same air. Everything in her screamed to close the distance, to kiss him, to take what she could before the morning stole it away. But she didn't. And neither did he. Because some lines, once crossed, couldn't be uncrossed. And they both knew that what waited on the other side wasn't freedom. It was devastation. So they held hands in the dark, and they didn't sleep, and they let the night stretch between them like a promise they couldn't keep. When dawn finally crept through the window, they were still lying there, still holding on, still refusing to let go. Tamsin woke to warmth, not the weak warmth of the dying fire or the thin blanket wrapped around her. This was different, solid, encompassing. A body pressed against her back, an arm draped over her waist, breath stirring her hair. Aldrich. Sometime during the few hours of restless sleep they'd managed, they'd migrated toward each other. His chest was flush against her spine, his legs tangled with hers beneath the blanket. His arm held her close, fingers splayed across her stomach, with an intimacy that stole her breath. She should move, should wake him, should put distance between them before this became something they couldn't explain away. But he was so warm, and she was so tired of being cold. Just a moment longer, she told herself. Then I'll move. The moment stretched. The gray morning light crept through the frosted window. The storm still raged outside, but softer now, the howling reduced to a persistent moan. She felt the change in his breathing before anything else, the shift from deep sleep to waking consciousness, the slight tensing of the arm around her waist. Then stillness, complete, frozen stillness. Miss Ashworth, his voice was rough with sleep, barely audible. Yes. We appear to be. Yes. Neither moved. His hand was warm through her nightgown, pressed against the curve of her stomach. She could feel his heartbeat against her back. Too fast, too hard. The chair collapsed again, he said quietly. Sometime in the night. I must have... It's fine. It's not fine. This is entirely improper. We've established that propriety abandoned us the moment we walked into this inn. A pause. His arm tightened fractionally around her waist, so slight she might have imagined it. I should move, he said. Yes. Back to the floor, or what remains of the chair. Yes. Neither of them moved. Tamsin closed her eyes, breathing him in. He smelled like wood smoke and wool, and something underneath that was simply him, a scent she'd never noticed before, but would never forget now. This is dangerous, he whispered. I know. If I don't move now, I might not be able to. Then move. But his arm stayed where it was. His body remained pressed against hers, and she felt the exact moment he stopped fighting. The slight exhale, the softening of tension in his muscles. Tamsin. Her name on his lips felt different in the morning light, more real, more terrifying. Don't, she whispered. Don't say anything you'll have to take back later. What if I don't want to take it back? She turned in his arms, facing him. The movement brought them closer, noses nearly touching, and breath mingling in the cold air between them. His eyes were the color of winter storms, pale gray with flecks of silver. This close, she could see the fine lines at their corners, the shadows of exhaustion beneath them. His hair was disheveled, falling across his forehead in a way she'd never seen. He looked vulnerable, human, nothing like the cold, dismissive man she'd hated for 7 years. We can't, she said quietly. You know we can't. I know. But his hand came up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His touch was gentle, reverent, as if she were something precious and breakable. I know we can't. I know it's wrong. I know every reason why this is a terrible idea. Then why aren't you moving away? Because for the first time in my life, I don't want to do the right thing. His thumb traced her cheekbone, the curve of her jaw. I want to do the selfish thing, the reckless thing. I want to pretend, just for a moment, that the world outside this room doesn't exist. Her pulse raced so hard she was certain he could hear it. Aldrich, tell me to stop. His voice was desperate. tell me to get up and walk away and never speak of this again, because I don't have the strength to do it myself. She opened her mouth to say the words, to be the sensible one, to protect them both from the devastation that would follow if they crossed this line. But what came out was, I can't. A sound escaped him, half groan, half laugh, entirely broken. We're doomed, he whispered. Probably. This will destroy us. I know. He leaned closer, forehead pressing against hers. They breathed together, the same air, the same impossible moment. A knock at the door shattered everything. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling? The innkeeper's wife's voice called through the wood. Breakfast in the common room, storms easing, might clear by evening. They sprang apart as if burned. Aldrich was off the bed and across the room in an instant, running a hand through his hair, straightening his rumpled clothes. Tamsin sat up, pulling the blanket around herself, her heart hammering for entirely different reasons now. Thank you, Aldrich called back, voice remarkably steady. We'll be down shortly. Footsteps retreated down the hall. Silence fell between them, thick, charged, unbearable. That was, Tamsin started. A warning. He wasn't looking at her. A reminder of where we are, what we're pretending to be. Aldrich, get dressed. His voice was clipped, controlled. The cold man from the carriage was back, walls rebuilt in an instant. We'll go downstairs. Maintain the fiction. And then, he finally looked at her, and something in his expression made her chest ache. And then we forget this happened. He left the room before she could respond, closing the door firmly behind him. Tamsin sat alone in the morning light, her body still warm where he'd held her, and wondered if forgetting was even possible anymore. The day passed in excruciating slow motion. They ate breakfast in the common room, surrounded by other travelers, playing the part of devoted newlyweds, while barely able to look at each other. Corvin Thorne watched from across the room, his gaze calculating, but he kept his distance. By afternoon, the storm had finally begun to break. Patches of blue appeared between the clouds, and the wind died down to something manageable. The innkeeper announced that the roads should be passable by tomorrow morning. One more night. That was all they had to survive. They returned to their room after supper, another meal eaten in tense silence, and stood on opposite sides of the tiny space like fighters in a ring. The floor, Aldrich said. I'll take the floor tonight. It's freezing. I don't care. Aldrich, I can't. His voice cracked. I can't lie beside you again and not, I can't. So I'll take the floor, and tomorrow we'll leave, and this will be over. She should have accepted it, should have let him suffer the cold floor while she took the bed, maintaining the distance they so desperately needed. Instead, she crossed the room. He watched her approach, every muscle in his body tense. What are you doing? I don't know. She stopped directly in front of him, close enough to touch. I should be letting you go. I should be making this easy. But I can't seem to do the sensible thing either. Tamsin, one night. Her voice trembled. We have one night left. Tomorrow we go back to the real world. You marry Lady Cosima. I return to being invisible. Everything goes back to the way it was. Yes. But tonight... She reached up, her hand trembling as it touched his chest. Tonight, I don't want to be sensible. I don't want to do the right thing. I want... What do you want? You. The word was barely a whisper. Just you. Just for tonight. Something shattered in his expression. The control he'd been maintaining all day crumbled away, leaving something raw and desperate in its place. If we do this, he said hoarsely, there's no going back. You understand that? We can never pretend it didn't happen. We can never be strangers again. I know. It will make everything harder. Every time I see you after this, every time I have to watch you across a room and pretend you're nothing to me. I know. She stepped closer, her other hand coming up to grip his shirt. I know it will be agony. I know we'll spend the rest of our lives regretting this moment. Then why? Because I'll spend the rest of my life regretting it more if I don't. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Because I've wanted you for 7 years, and I never knew, and now I do, and I can't. Her voice broke. I can't let you go without knowing what it would have been like. I can't. He made a sound low in his throat, pain and want and surrender all tangled together. And then his mouth was on hers. The kiss was nothing like she'd imagined. It wasn't gentle or tentative or sweet. It was desperate, bruising. 7 years of denial and longing poured into a single point of contact. His hands were in her hair, pulling pins free, letting the dark waves tumble over her shoulders. Her fingers were clutching his shirt, dragging him closer, trying to eliminate any space between them. Tamsin. He gasped her name against her lips. God, Tamsin. Don't stop. She kissed him again, harder. Please don't stop. He walked her backward until she hit the wall, pressing his body against hers with a groan. His mouth traced a path down her neck, finding the pulse point that fluttered wildly beneath her skin. We shouldn't, he murmured against her throat. I don't care. Everyone we know. They're not here. She pulled his face back to hers. No one is here but us. Just you and me and this room and this night. One night, he repeated. One night. Something shifted in his eyes. A decision made. A line crossed. When he kissed her again, it was different. Slower, more deliberate. The kiss of a man who'd stopped fighting and started savoring. He lifted her easily, carrying her to the narrow bed that had been the source of so much tension. Laid her down with a gentleness that made her ache. Tell me to stop, he whispered, hovering over her. Any moment, any point. Tell me to stop, and I will. I won't. Promise me you'll tell me if... Aldrich. She pulled him down to her, silencing him with a kiss. Stop talking. He laughed. A genuine laugh, warm and broken and beautiful. And then there were no more words. There was only heat and breath diving skin. Only his hands learning every curve of her body, her fingers tracing the lines of his. Only the soft sounds they made in the darkness, confessions without language. When they finally came together, it felt like coming home, like finding something she hadn't known she'd been searching for. He moved above her, inside her, whispering her name like a prayer, and she held on to him like he was the only solid thing in a world that had tilted off its axis. After, they lay tangled together, hearts pounding in synchrony, neither willing to be the first to break the spell. I love you, he said quietly. I should have said it sooner. I should have said it years ago. I love you too. The words came easily now. I think I've loved you since that first dinner, when you were so cold and dismissive, and I wanted to throw my soup at your head. He laughed softly, pressing a kiss to her temple. I wanted to kiss you that night. You were arguing with your brother about some political matter, and your cheeks were flushed, and I thought I'd never seen anyone so alive. You told me my opinions were charming but misguided. I was terrified. You terrified me. So I pushed you away because it was safer than admitting what I felt. She traced patterns on his chest, feeling the steady thump of his heart beneath her palm. What happens now? She asked. I don't know. He pulled her closer. I know what should happen. What's expected. What I've promised. Lady Cosima. Yes. The name hung between them, a reminder of everything waiting outside this room. I can't ask you to break your engagement, Tamsin said quietly. I won't be the reason you destroy your family's alliances. You're not asking. I'm choosing. Aldrich, not tonight. He kissed her forehead, her eyelids, and the tip of her nose. Tonight, there's only us. We'll face the impossible tomorrow. She wanted to argue, wanted to plan, to strategize, to find some way through the maze of duty and expectation that surrounded them. But his arms were warm around her, and the night was dark, and tomorrow felt very far away. So she closed her eyes and let herself pretend, just for a few more hours, that this could last. Tamsin woke to cold. The space beside her was empty. The blanket had been pulled up over her shoulders, a small kindness, but the warmth that had surrounded her all night was gone. Aldrich stood by the window, fully dressed, watching the clear morning sky with an expression that made her stomach drop. "The storm's broken," he said without turning. "The roads are passable. We leave within the hour." His voice was flat, controlled. Every trace of the man who'd held her so tenderly had vanished. "Aldrich, we should discuss what happens when we return." He still didn't look at her. "The story will tell. How we'll handle the situation." "The situation." She sat up, clutching the blanket to her chest. "Is that what last night was? A situation?" He flinched, but his expression didn't change. Last night was a mistake. The word hit like a physical blow. "A mistake," she repeated slowly. "Yes." Finally, he turned. His eyes were empty, shuttered. The cold man from the carriage returned in full force. We were emotional, vulnerable. We made a decision we shouldn't have made. But it doesn't have to destroy everything. Destroy everything? Aldrich, you told me you loved me. I know what I said. Did you mean it? His mouth pressed into a hard line. It doesn't matter what I meant. Of course it matters. No. His voice sharpened. It doesn't. Because nothing has changed. I'm still promised to Cosima. The alliance is still critical. My duty is still what it's always been. Tamsin stared at him, something cold spreading through her chest. So, that's it, she said quietly. One night. And now, we pretend it never happened. That's what we agreed. We agreed to a lot of things in the dark. I thought daylight might have changed your perspective. Daylight changes nothing except visibility. The obstacles are the same. The impossibilities are the same. He moved toward the door. Get dressed. The carriage will be ready soon. Aldrich, wait. For what? He spun back, and for just a moment, she saw the anguish beneath the cold. What do you want me to say, Tamsin? That I'll throw away everything. My family's future. Hundreds of people's livelihoods. Alliances that took decades to build. Because of one night? I want you to say you'll fight for me. Her voice broke. That's what you said last night. That you'd choose me. I said a lot of things last night. I wasn't thinking clearly. Because you were happy. For once in your life, you were happy. And you weren't thinking about duty and obligation. You were thinking about what you wanted. What I want is irrelevant. Stop saying that. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. Stop dismissing your own feelings like they don't matter. Like I don't matter. You matter, his voice cracked. God, Tamsin, you matter more than anything. That's why this has to end. That doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense. He crossed to her, gripping her shoulders. If I pursue this, if I break my engagement, if I defy my father, if I choose you, it will destroy you. Don't you understand? The scandal, the whispers, the way society will tear you apart for being the woman who ruined the Duke of Thornmere's heir. I don't care about society. You should, because they'll make your life unbearable. They'll make your brother's life unbearable. Everyone connected to you will suffer because of a choice I made. That's my decision to make, not yours. No, his grip tightened. I won't let you sacrifice yourself for me. I won't watch you destroyed by something I set in motion. So you'll destroy me instead by walking away? He released her, stepping back. You'll recover. You'll find someone else. Someone who can give you the life you deserve without all the complications. I don't want someone else. You will. Eventually. He moved to the door. I'll wait downstairs. We need to leave soon if we want to reach Ashworth House before dark. Aldrich, I'm sorry. His hand rested on the doorframe. I know that's inadequate. I know nothing I say will make this better. But I am sorry. For all of it. He left. The door closed behind him with terrible finality. Tamsin sat alone in the cold room, surrounded by the evidence of what they'd done. The rumpled bed, the scattered hairpins, the lingering scent of him on her skin, and felt something vital shatter in her chest. She dressed mechanically, numb fingers fumbling with buttons and laces. She repacked her trunk without seeing what she was doing. By the time she descended to the common room, she'd constructed a mask of composure that felt paper thin, but would have to suffice. Aldrich was by the door, speaking with the innkeeper. Corvin Thorne sat nearby, watching them both with knowing eyes. Mrs. Sterling. Corvin rose as she approached. You look pale. I hope the storm didn't trouble you too greatly. I'm fine. Are you? You seem... He tilted his head. Different this morning. It's been a difficult few days. I'm sure it has. His voice was low, intimate. If you ever need to talk about it, about anything, I hope you know I'm available, as a friend. Thank you, Mr. Thorne. But I have nothing to discuss. Of course not. His smile was sharp. Though I notice your husband seems rather distant this morning. Trouble in paradise? Mind your business, Thorne. Aldrich had appeared beside her, expression thunderous, merely expressing concern for an old friend. Corvin held up his hands. Safe travels, Mrs. Sterling. Or should I say, Miss Ashworth. Tamsin's blood went cold. What are you implying? Nothing at all. His eyes glittered. Just that names are such flexible things, aren't they? Today we're one person. Tomorrow, we might be someone else entirely. Aldrich's hand clamped around her elbow, steering her toward the door. We're leaving. They walked out into the blinding white morning, snow crunching beneath their boots, and climbed into the waiting carriage without speaking. The door closed. The horses began to move, and the impossible, precious thing that had existed between them, that fragile, terrifying love, began to die in the cold light of day. The journey home was torture. They sat on opposite sides of the carriage, avoiding eye contact, speaking only when absolutely necessary. The hours stretched like years. Every mile that passed carried them closer to reality, and further from the brief, impossible world they'd created together. Ashworth House appeared as dusk was falling. The familiar stone facade, the warm glow of windows, the silhouette of Piers standing on the front steps waiting for them. Tamsin's brother rushed forward as the carriage stopped, pulling her into a fierce embrace the moment she descended. Thank God, he breathed. We got your message about the storm, but when days passed without word, I was ready to send a search party. I'm fine. The words felt hollow. Just tired. You look exhausted. Piers held her at arm's length, studying her face. Both of you. Merrick, you look like you haven't slept in a week. The accommodations were less than ideal, Aldrich said quietly, but we survived. Something in his tone made Piers' eyes narrow. What happened out there? Nothing. Tamsin forced a smile. The storm, the crowded inn, the stress of waiting, that's all. Piers didn't look convinced, but he let it go for the moment. Come inside. Mother's been worried sick. There's hot food and warm fires and... I should go, Aldrich cut in. My father will be expecting me. He'll have heard about the storm by now. At least stay for supper, Piers protested. You've been traveling all day. I can't. His jaw was tight. Give my regards to your parents. I'll call in a few days. He climbed back into the carriage without looking at Tamsin, without a word of farewell. The door closed, and then he was gone, disappearing down the drive in the fading light. Piers watched the carriage go with a troubled expression. What happened between you two? Nothing. Tamsin? I said nothing. She couldn't meet his eyes. I'm tired, Pierce. Can we please just go inside? He let her retreat to her room, let her claim exhaustion and close the door. But his expression said clearly, this conversation isn't over. 3 days passed. Tamsin moved through them like a ghost, eating when forced, sleeping in fits and starts, avoiding her family's concerned questions. She heard nothing from Aldrich. No message, no call, no indication that their time together had meant anything at all. On the 4th morning, a letter arrived. Not from Aldrich, from Corvin Thorne. Dear Miss Ashworth, it began, and her stomach dropped at the formal address. I hope this letter finds you well. I wanted to inform you that certain information has come to my attention regarding your journey from Thornmere. Specifically, the nature of your accommodations at the Stag and Stone Inn. I understand that circumstances were difficult, and I cast no judgment on what arrangements were necessary for survival. However, I feel it my duty to warn you that others may not be as understanding. Word travels, Miss Ashworth, especially word of a future duke sharing quarters with an unmarried woman. If this information were to reach certain ears, Lady Cosima's family, for instance, or the newspapers that love to report on aristocratic scandal, the consequences could be severe. I have no desire to see you harmed. Quite the opposite. But I find myself in need of certain considerations, and I believe we might be able to help each other. Meet me at the Blackwood Gardens this Thursday at noon. Come alone. We can discuss terms that will benefit us both. Your devoted friend, Corvin Thorne. Tamsin's hands shook as she read it again. And again. Blackmail. He was blackmailing her, using what he'd witnessed, what he'd guessed, to force her into some kind of arrangement. She should tell Piers, should tell her parents, should find Aldrich and warn him that their secret wasn't as safe as they'd hoped. But telling anyone meant admitting what had happened, meant destroying everything anyway, just from a different angle. She was still sitting there, frozen, when a second letter arrived. This one was from Aldrich. Miss Ashworth, I write to inform you that I've ended my engagement to Lady Cosima. She deserves better than a man whose heart belongs elsewhere. I couldn't continue the pretense knowing what I know now. The alliance with her family is broken. My father is furious, and the consequences I feared are already beginning to unfold. But I find I cannot regret it. Cannot regret any of it. I know I told you that what happened between us was a mistake. That was the worst lie I've ever told. The truth is that every moment with you was the most honest I've ever been. And walking away from you was the hardest thing I've ever done. I don't expect this to change anything. I don't expect you to forgive me for my cowardice at the inn. But I thought you should know. You're not invisible. You never were. And I will spend the rest of my life regretting that I didn't choose you sooner. Yours in every way that matters, Aldrich. She read it 3 times. 4. The words blurred through tears. He'd broken his engagement, destroyed his family's alliance, faced his father's wrath, for her. But Corvin's letter sat beside it, poisonous and threatening. The scandal Aldrich had feared was coming, one way or another, unless she stopped it. She rose, wiping her eyes, and began to plan. Thursday arrived cold and clear. Tamsin walked through the empty paths of Blackwood Gardens, her heart pounding, Corvin's letter folded in her pocket. She hadn't told anyone where she was going, hadn't responded to Aldrich's letter. She'd spent 3 days preparing for this moment, and she was terrified. Corvin waited by the frozen fountain at the garden's center, elegant as always, his smile sharp as broken glass. Miss Ashworth, how lovely to see you. Mr. Thorne. She stopped several feet away. What do you want? Straight to business. I appreciate that. He gestured to a nearby bench. Shall we sit? I'll stand. As you wish. His smile didn't waver. I'll be direct then. I know what happened at the Stag and Stone. The shared room, the fake marriage, the intimacy that went far beyond propriety. I saw it in your faces when you left that morning. A blind man could have seen it. You have no proof. I don't need proof. Rumor is enough. Suggestion is enough. One word to the right people, and your reputation is destroyed. Your family is humiliated. And Lord Merrick, well, his engagement to Lady Cosima is already broken, isn't it? This scandal would finish him entirely. What do you want? She repeated. You. The word was simple, devastating. I've wanted you for years, Miss Ashworth. Your beauty, your fire, your family's connections. But you never noticed me. Never gave me a chance. And now I find myself in a position to encourage your attention. You want to force me to marry you. Force is such an ugly word. I prefer persuade. Marry me, and I'll never speak of what I know. Your reputation stays intact. Your family stays protected. Lord Merrick stays out of the scandal sheets. Everyone wins. Except me. You win a wealthy husband who adores you. Is that so terrible? You don't adore me. Her voice was hard. You adore what I represent. My family's money. My brother's connections. The status a wife of good family would bring you. His face darkened. Anger, quickly masked. You're more perceptive than I gave you credit for. I'm not going to marry you, Mr. Thorne. Then I'll destroy you. No. A new voice cut through the cold air. You won't. Tamsin spun. Aldrich strode toward them across the frozen garden, his expression thunderous. Behind him came Piers, her father, and, to her shock, the Duke of Thornmere himself, Aldrich's father. Lord Merrick. Corvin's smile faltered. What a surprise. Is it? Aldrich stopped beside Tamsin, close enough that their shoulders touched. You're not as clever as you think, Thorne. Your letter to Miss Ashworth wasn't the only one you sent. You made the mistake of trying to extort my father as well. Corvin's face went pale. Something about debts, wasn't it? The Duke of Thornmere's voice was ice. Threatening to expose my son's indiscretions unless I paid a significant sum to make the problem disappear? I don't know what your save your lies. The Duke moved forward, imposing despite his years. I've spent 50 years navigating political intrigue. Did you really think some minor family's bankrupt son could manipulate me? Your Grace, here is what's going to happen. Aldrich cut in. You're going to leave. You're going to forget everything you think you know about Miss Ashworth and myself, and you're going to never, ever contact either of us again. And if I refuse, then I'll make certain every family in England knows about your gambling debts, your forged letters of credit, and the rather concerning incident involving Lord Pemberton's daughter last season. Aldrich's voice was lethal. You think you have power over us? You have nothing. You are nothing. And if you ever threaten Tamsin again, I will personally ensure you spend the rest of your miserable life regretting it. Corvin stood frozen, eyes darting between them, calculating his odds. Whatever he saw made him take a step back. This isn't over, he said weakly. It's very much over. Piers stepped forward, fists clenched. Leave now, Thorne. Before I do something we'll both regret. Corvin left. They watched him go, a diminishing figure against the white landscape, until he disappeared entirely. Then Aldrich turned to Tamsin. You came alone, he said. You didn't tell anyone. I thought I could handle it. By doing what? Sacrificing yourself to protect everyone else? You were going to sacrifice yourself for the same reasons. That's different. It's exactly the same. She faced him fully, chin lifted. You don't get to be the only martyr, Aldrich. You don't get to protect everyone while refusing to let anyone protect you. I wasn't trying to... You broke your engagement. The words tumbled out. You destroyed your family's alliance. You faced your father's wrath. Why? You know why. Tell me. Her voice trembled. Say it. I need to hear you say it." He stared at her for a long moment. Behind them, Piers and the two fathers watched in silence. "Because I love you." The words came out raw, desperate. "Because every moment I spent pretending I didn't was torture. Because when I left you at that inn, called you a mistake, tried to convince myself I could walk away, I knew I was lying. I've been lying for 7 years. Tamsin, I don't want to lie anymore." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "You hurt me. I know. I'm sorry. I was trying to protect you. I don't need protection. I need you." She stepped closer. "I need you to choose me. Not because circumstances forced your hand. Not because Corvin threatened us. Because you want to. Because I'm worth fighting for." "You are worth fighting for." He caught her face between his hands. "You're worth everything. You're worth destroying alliances and defying fathers and facing scandal. You're worth all of it. Then fight for me." "I am." His forehead pressed against hers. "I broke my engagement. I confronted my father. I came here ready to tear Thorn apart with my bare hands. What else do you need me to do?" "Ask me." He pulled back, confused. "Ask you what?" "Ask me what you should have asked years ago, before Lady Cosima, before all of it." Understanding dawned in his eyes, slowly, deliberately. He lowered himself to one knee in the frozen garden, surrounded by witnesses, with no ring and no preparation, and nothing but the truth between them. "Tamsin Ashworth," he said, voice steady despite the cold. "I have loved you since the moment you argued with your brother about parliamentary reform, and I was too much of a coward to admit it. I have wasted 7 years pretending you didn't matter to me. I don't want to waste another moment." He took her hand, his grip warm and sure. "Will you marry me? Not for alliances, not for duty, for love, for the rest of our lives." She sank to her knees in front of him, ignoring the cold, ignoring the audience, seeing only him. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times, yes. He kissed her there in the frozen garden, in full view of her brother, and both their fathers, with scandal and society, and the entire world watching. And for the first time in 7 years, neither of them cared about anything but each other. The scandal, when it came, was everything they'd feared. Within a week, all of London knew that Lord Aldrich Vance had broken his engagement to Lady Cosima Blackwell to marry Miss Tamsin Ashworth, a woman of lesser standing with whom he'd been trapped during a blizzard under circumstances that set tongues wagging from Mayfair to Manchester. The whispers were vicious. Tamsin was called everything from opportunist to seductress. Aldrich was accused of abandoning his responsibilities for the sake of base passion. But they weathered it together. Aldrich stood beside her at every social function, his hand steady on her back, his expression daring anyone to speak a word against her. Piers defended his sister with fierce loyalty. And the Duke of Thornmere, who had initially been furious, eventually came to see the match for what it was. A love strong enough to risk everything. "She makes him happy," the Duke told his wife one evening, watching Aldrich laugh at something Tamsin had said. "Truly happy. I'm not sure I've ever seen that before." They married 6 weeks after the proposal, in a small ceremony, attended only by family and close friends. Lady Cosima, gracious to the end, sent a gift and her sincere wishes for their happiness. Corvin Thorn was conspicuously absent. Rumor had it he'd fled to the continent to escape his debts. The wedding night was spent at a modest inn on the road to Thornmere, not by accident, but by choice. "One room," Aldrich said to the innkeeper, his arm around Tamsin's waist. "One bed." The innkeeper smiled knowingly. "Newlyweds?" "Very much so." Their room was small but warm, with a fire crackling in the hearth and snow beginning to fall outside the window. They stood together, watching the flakes drift past, wrapped in each other's arms. "Remember when this was a prison?" Tamsin murmured. I remember. He pressed a kiss to her temple. I remember thinking I'd never survive being trapped with you. And now? Now I can't imagine surviving without you. She turned in his arms, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. I love you. I love you too. He caught her hand, kissing her palm. Every day. Every moment. For the rest of our lives. Promise? I promise. They fell into bed together, not desperately this time, not stealing moments between impossibilities, but with the luxury of knowing they had forever. Every touch was a declaration. Every kiss was a promise kept. After, as they lay tangled together in the warmth, Aldrich laughed quietly. What? Tamsin asked. I was just thinking about the carriage, that first day, when you said the storm was my fault. It was your fault. You should have listened to the coachman. If I'd listened to the coachman, we'd have left earlier. We'd have reached your estate before the blizzard. We'd never have stopped at that inn. And we'd never have been trapped together. Exactly. He pulled her closer. So technically, my stubbornness is responsible for our entire happiness. She laughed, swatting his chest. That's a very generous interpretation. I prefer to think of it as fate. Fate? One room, one bed, and a blizzard that made it impossible to refuse. He kissed her softly. Some storms are worth getting lost in. 2 years later, winter had come again to Thornmere. Tamsin stood by the window of the ducal estate, watching snow drift across the gardens. Inside the house, fires roared, servants bustled with Christmas preparations, and somewhere in the nursery, their 6-month-old daughter was being thoroughly spoiled by her doting grandfather, the Duke having softened considerably since becoming a grandparent. Arms slipped around her from behind. Wool gathering? Aldrich's voice was warm against her ear. Remembering. The blizzard? The inn. The room. The bed. She leaned back into him. The moment I realized I loved the most infuriating man in England. Only England? I was hoping for at least Europe. She laughed, turning in his arms. He looked different now than he had that day in the carriage. Softer. Happier. The perpetual tension gone from his shoulders. There were new lines around his eyes, but they came from laughing, not worry. I was so certain you hated me, she said, and I was so certain I could pretend I didn't love you. He shook his head. We were both fools. Fortunate fools. That storm saved us. The storm, the inn, the innkeeper with his one available room. He smiled. I should write them a thank you letter. I'm sure they'd appreciate hearing that their terrible accommodations resulted in a duchess. He pulled her closer, swaying slightly as if to music only they could hear. Do you have any regrets? He asked quietly. About marrying the most infuriating man in England. Occasionally. Tamsin. Never. She met his eyes. Not a single one. Not even when you leave your boots in the middle of the hallway, or argue with me about crop rotation, or insist that you know better about absolutely everything. I do know better about most things. See? Infuriating. He kissed her, slow and sweet and full of promise. One room, he murmured against her lips. One bed. And the blizzard made it impossible to refuse. The best impossible situation of my life. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing Thornmere in white. Inside, the fire crackled. Their daughter cooed, and 2 people who'd spent 7 years pretending not to love each other held on tight. Because some storms, it turned out, were worth getting lost in. Some impossible situations were worth embracing. And some loves, the real ones, the difficult ones, the ones that required courage and sacrifice, and choosing each other every single day. Those loves were worth everything. If you're not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because there are more stories waiting, more impossible loves, more storms worth weathering. More moments that remind us why we believe in happily ever after. Thank you for being here. You are the reason these stories exist.